Today I am presenting the very important topic, pulmonary embolism after bariatric surgery. Let's start with the introduction. The most common cause of mortality after bariatric surgery is sepsis due to anastomotic leak, cardiac causes, and the pulmonary embolism. So the pulmonary embolism is one of the most important cause of morbidity and mortality after bariatric surgery. What is venous thromboembolism? It comprises DVT, deep vein thrombosis, and pulmonary embolism. Uh, when we see the incidence, overall incidence, considering all the studies, it ranges from 0 to 5.4%, the incidence of DVT, and the incidence of pulmonary embolism ranges from 0 to 6.4%. But when we see the most large series, they reported that VT rate is less than 1% for the average risk bariatric patient. Coming to the risk factor of venous thromboembolism, that has been divided into two parts: risk due to patient-related risk factor, and second is due to procedure-related. In the patient-related risk factors, the common risk factors are age more than 55 or 60. In different cities, the cutoff is taken different, and male sex, patient weight or BMI. The cutoff taken is BMI more than 50, and patient having history of venous thromboembolism, history of smoking. Patient is immobile because of other comorbidity, osteoarthritis, your weight. Patient having a history of hypercoagulability, and the patient is known case of obesity, hypoventilation syndrome, having pulmonary hypertension or venous sepsis disease, or he or she is receiving like hormonal therapy, maybe in the form of contraception, OCP. Coming to the procedure-related risk factor, the open, when we compare the open versus laparoscopic procedure, definitely open bariatric surgery have higher risk of VT. Other factors are if the operative time is greater than 3 hours, it is considered one of the risk factors. If the patient develops complications during or after the surgery, there are a list of complications which I will let you know in the later slide. Here I have mentioned anastomotically one of the complications, and it is also based upon the procedure type. It is obvious when we compare the other bariatric procedure in comparison to laparoscopic adjustable gastric banding. All other bariatric procedures are having the high risk of VT in comparison to LAGV. And the regional bariatric definitely it will increase the risk of VT. So coming to the methods we use to prevent the venous thromboembolism. Basically, these are the four modes of therapy, starting from the early ambulation. Second one is the lower extremity compression devices. It constitutes a graduated compression elastic stockings. Second one is IPC, intermittent pneumatic compression with sequential compression devices. And in pharmacological prophylaxis, generally unfractioned heparin and low molecular weight heparin is widely studied in bariatric group of patients. In some cases, we also use vena cava filter. Let's see all the methods one by one, what the literature actually mentions about the each mode of prophylactic measure. So coming to early ambulation, the purpose of early ambulation is to reduce the venous stasis. That will definitely reduces the risk of deep vein thrombosis. So the question is when to be started. So it is recommended that it should be as early as possible. Within it should be within 2 hours of shifting the patient to the ward. It is highly recommended, but not analyzed. But no any study really has analyzed its effectiveness in isolation. Coming to second mode of prophylactic method, that is the lower extremity compression devices. The devices, the name of devices is either DVT pump or IPC pump or compression pump, as mentioned, as shown in the picture. The recommended patient setting for the pediatric patient is 2 mm of Hg. So when we see the DVD machine, there is a knob over the top of that machine, and there is a green signal and red signal. So up to 50 mm of SD, there is a green signal. So the knobs would be till 50, not more than 50, because after 50 there is a red signal. So the recommended setting pressure is 40. So you have not to cross the 50. So this should be checked during applications of DVT pump during operation theater. Also after during shifting of the patient to the ward, because sometimes may by mistaken that knobs rotated by some staff, so that may causes necrosis, skin necrosis, other complications. And what will be the length of cuff used in the DVD pump? There are two types of cuff. One is till upper thigh, starting from the ankle to upper thigh, and second up to below knee. Generally, we prefer to use up to the cuff up to upper thigh, because this gives more stability. When the patient starts ambulating, it doesn't slip from the patient leg. So it is logically highly convincing. So what is the standard DVD pump cycle? Generally, one cycle takes around 1 minute, in which 12 seconds it is the inflation of the DVD cuff, and 48 seconds is for the deflation and the pause period. So what should be the recommended duration for this DVT pump therapy? It, it is recommended that it should be used at least 48 hours, or till when the patient becomes fully ambulatory, which is defined as a walking at least 5 minutes actively per hour. So there are several benefits to the compression therapy, because it's easy to use. It is a non-invasive method of prophylaxis, and it is clinically proven. It is relaxing for the patient and having the fewer side effects. So let's talk about the side effect. So there are some relative and absolute contraindications for the use of DVT pump. If the patient having pain or numbness of the extremity, if if there is severe peripheral arteriosclerosis or gangrenous changes, then it should not be used. It is absolutely contraindicated in this situation. In congestive heart failure, it is also not recommended, because it increases the venous return, which further deteriorate the CHF. So if patient having the dermatitis over the leg area, untreated leg infected wound, and having the history of recent skin graft, in this situation, it should be avoided. So when we see the literature, there is no study really comparing this mechanical mode of prophylaxis to uh, non no, non-compression devices, other methods like early ambulations or in the bariatric surgery patient. Most studies use some form of mechanical prophylaxis in combination. When we see the Cochrane review in other non-bariatric surgical patients, the study, that analysis, this review was done by the Sachdeva et al. In 2010, and he reported there is 65% reduction in the post-operative DVT with the use of graduated compression stocking. In other studies, in a meta-analysis comparing IPC DVT pumps with no prophylaxis, there was a reduction in the risk of DVT by approximately 60% was found. So it is highly recommended to use compression devices in bariatric surgical patients. So coming to pharmacological prophylaxis, there is no consensus regarding the choices of drugs to be used for the pharmacoprophylaxis. What should be the dose? Dose should be fixed dose combination, or should be adjusted uh, based upon the case-to-case basis, based upon the BMI, and what should be the actual duration for the different category of patients, and which patient will really get the extended prophylaxis. and when to use the Behna-Keva filter. So really, these are the 4, 5 topics. There is no consensus in the literature. Let's see one by one. So the unfractioned heparin and low molecular weight heparin have been extensively used in bariatric surgery. A lot of literature exists demonstrating the safety and efficacy of pharmacological prophylaxis, but there is a limited class 1 evidence to guide specific recommendations regarding dosing and duration of pharmacoprophylaxis. So let's compare the pharmacoprophylaxis with mechanical prophylaxis. Which one is better and which one is highly recommended? When I gone to the literature, I found there is no direct comparison between these two modalities separately. There is limited data for the bariatric surgical patient. On extrapolation of data from the general surgery reveals that trial of unfractioned heparin showed a risk reduction of 47% and 41% for the fatal and non-fatal pulmonary embolism respectively. From the 8 clinical trials in general surgery, it was found that low molecular weight heparin versus placebo or no prophylaxis suggests a 71% risk reduction of overall clinical evidence of VT events and pulmonary embolism. So data not directly related to bariatric surgery, but from general surgery suggests that the pharmacoprophylaxis in the form of unfractioned heparin and low molecular weight heparin is really useful, helpful in preventing VTE, DVT, and pulmonary embolism. So coming to the literature by Michael Gagner, published in 2012. It was the topic for this literature was the adding chemoprophylaxis to sequential compression may not reduce the risk of VT in bariatric surgical patients. So the study is a type of multi-center retrospective cohort study. More than 4,000 patients was involved, and the data was taken from the labs database from March 2005 to 2007. And 30-day post-operative VT rate was calculated for both the cohorts in the combined group in which the pharmacologic and compression therapy, and a DVT pump, the VT rate was found to be 0.47%. And in the other group, in which only DVT pump was using alone, the rate of VT was 0.255%. So data suggests the only DVT pump therapy is more beneficial, but there is some limitations of this study. There was fewer main and the fewer duodenal switch procedure in the first group, in the combined group. It means these are the risk factors for developing VT. So in the first group, the incidence of VT should be very less, but the data suggests opposite thing. So the author concluded, before conclusion, there was a 5 patient in the sequential compression device plus anticoagulation and combination therapy group required blood transfusion. That is obvious. And the 30-day mortality was present, but that was not statistically significant. And the author concluded, data presented are insufficient to make final recommendation concerning the prophylactic treatment. In another study by Franz Zeitz et al. On the routine anticoagulation for VT prevention following laparoscopic gastric bypass. It was published in 2012 in JSLS, and in 2012, more than 1,600 patients was incorporated in this study. All the patients underwent laparoscopic Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, and data was collected between the 2001 to 2008. And the patient has been divided into 2 groups. In one group, in group A, the patient received universal prophylaxis, follow the universal prophylaxis protocol. It includes 435 patients, and all the patients received enoxaparin subcutaneous BD with DVT pump therapy. In the second group, group B, more than 1,200 patients was included, and it was called as a risk stratified protocol group because all the patients received the DVT pump therapy, but selected patients received enoxaparin, and that patient was of high risk patient, and the high risk is defined for this collection was either the personal or the family history of hypercoagulability state or family history of VAT. So I have just tabularized this data. In the risk stratified group, sorry, you can see the DVT, pulmonary embolism, and intraluminal bleed. All are less in a risk stratified group, and all are statistically significant. So, but the limitation of this study was in group B, there was shorter operative time and a lower average BMI. And the number of patients in group B who received low molecular weight heparin was not clear. So, according to this data, the author interpreted that adequate weighty prophylaxis can be achieved with this mode of therapy, DVT pump, early ambulation, uh, and emphasis on hydration should be given, and operative time should be keep shorter. And second conclusion was bariatric surgery can be safely performed without pharmacological weighty prophylaxis in low risk population. Low risk population. So there is again there is no consensus. Now let's talk about the uh, uh, choices of pharmacological prophylaxis. So generally in bariatric surgery patient, we use two drugs. One is low molecular weight heparin, and other is the unfractionated heparin. Let's see the comparison what on the literature the data suggests. Before going to the literature, just I want to give you a brief idea about the properties of these two categories of drugs. Mechanism of action is almost same, both act on anti-thrombin 3 and inhibit the factor 2, 8, 10, 11, 12. So the bio on the when we talk about the viability, the unfractionated heparin has having the lower viability, and the low molecular heparin having the better. So it has easier substance absorption. So if the patient having super obese, then its low molecular heparin will serve better because having the good bioavailability. When we talk about the shorter half life, it unfractionated heparin having 1 to 2 hour of T half, and low molecular having the T half of 4 to 5 hours. So it required less frequent injection, and the predictability of response was good with the low molecular heparin. Monitoring is also not required with the low molecular heparin. And when we talk about the antidote, because of shorter half-life, unfractionated heparin generally terminate by itself. And in the low molecular weight heparin group, we measure the anti-10A activity. So this is the data here. Generally, what we used is the low molecular heparin is the come in the 0.4 ml syringe. It consists around the 40 microgram of low molecular heparin, and when we just titrate according to international unit, it's equivalent to 4,000 international. That is the 4,000 anti-10A activity. So when there is a when by any means, if suppose you are giving the low molecular heparin and patient bleeding started, then you want reversal. In that cases, you have to measure the activity of anti-10A activity, and the antidote for low molecular weight is the protamine sulfate, and the 1 milligram of protamine neutralizes 100 anti-10A unit of low molecular weight. Accordingly, you can titrate how much doses of protamine is required. After giving protamine, you can repeat this testing after 2 hours, and if required, second sort of protamine can be repeated. Generally, it is given through IV route, but subcutaneous will also be used, and it is mostly given through subcutaneous route. The side effect, when you see the side effect, the HIT, the heparin-induced thrombocytopenia and osteoporosis more with the unfractionated heparin group due to heparin, unfractionated heparin. So coming to the study, there is a study by Buckmeyer, and it is published in uh, mm, American uh, from Journal of Surgery in 2012. It is a basically comparative effectiveness of unfractioned and low molecular heparin for the prevention of VET in the following bariatric surgery. The design of that study was a cohort study, and the the data was taken from the Michigan Bariatric Surgical Collaborative. It is a statewide registry, clinical registry system that includes around 20 hospital and more than 90 bariatric surgeons in this data collection collected by this registry. And for this study, the patient was included in this more than 24,000, and study was conducted with the data was the patient was operated in between 2007 and 12. So in this study, the comparison of three pattern of therapy was basically studied. And in the first group, the heparin, unfractioned heparin was given pre-operatively and also post-operatively. In the second group, pre-operatively unfractioned heparin and low molecular weight heparin in the post-operative period. In third group, low molecular weight heparin pre and post-operatively both. They made the three groups for the comparison. So what they found the VT risks were significantly lower in the group second and third, low molecular heparin pre-op and post-op group, and unfractioned heparin pre-op and low molecular and post-op. In these two groups, they found there is a low incidence of VT in comparison to the unfractioned pre-op and unfractioned post-op. For high risk VT group, high risk is defined as when the projected risk of VT is more than 1%. That has been defined as a high risk group. And the VT rate for low molecular weight heparin pre-op and post-op is 1.46. That is lesser than second group, unfractioned heparin pre-op and low molecular weight heparin post-op. That is around 2.36. So in the high risk patient, the group having the low molecular weight heparin and the pre-op and post-op serving better. But this data was not exactly different than that of unfractioned heparin and pre-op and post-op. So no significant difference in the rate of hemorrhage or serious hemorrhage noted among all the groups. So the author concluded, sorry, just a minute. So author concluded low molecular heparin is more effective than unfractioned heparin in the prevention of post-operative VT without increasing the rate of bleeding. But please be noted, there is they not included the dosing and duration data of different mode of therapy, and 98% of patients received also the mechanical prophylaxis, and 3.2% patient had underwent IVC prophylactic center placement. And this is the largest study evaluating different VT prophylaxis regimen in different comparison of heparin and unfractioned heparin. In another study by Kothari published in 2007 in American Journal of Surgery, it is basically a non-randomized study of two consecutive cohort of 230% in each group. In the first cohort received enoxaparin 14 milligrams subcutaneous on day -1 of the pre-operative period, and also on the operative day, day 0, then BD till the time of discharge. In the second cohort received unfractioned heparin 5,000 international units subcutaneous on pre-operative day, day -1, but not on day of surgery, and then received TDS 3 times a day till the time of discharge. All patients also received the sequential compression device, and early ambulation was initiated in all the patients, and all the patients underwent laparoscopy ruined by gastric bypass. So the demographic data of this study, the highlighted here, the heparin, the okay, initial weight, this one. the BMI difference in both the group was significant, and the operating time was more in heparin receiving group in comparison to enoxaparin group, and the BMI was a little bit higher in enoxaparin group and lesser in heparin group. So coming to comparison between the two cohorts, so the density between both the group was 0, 0, and this was not especially significant. What is especially significant was the bleeding. So the bleeding was higher in the first cohort that received enoxaparin, and lesser, it's 1.3% in the second cohort that received the unfractionated heparin. So the author concluded both enoxaparin and heparin are effective in preventing VT, because there are 0, 0 cases and 0, 1 cases in this, so that was not statistically significant. And the heparin is the preferred agent than enoxaparin due to excessive bleeding in this series. So now let us talk about the doses, about the fixed doses and weight adjusted doses. There are few studies I have found in the literature about the fixed dose combinations and dose adjusted heparin in the patients. So there is a study by the Beccattini, published in SORTS in 2012. They studied the topic was venous thromboembolism after laparoscopic bariatric surgery for morbid obesity, clinical burden and prevention. So it is a systematic review and meta-analysis. They included 19 studies. Basically, only 4 studies really having used the dose-adjusted regimen doses. Otherwise, other studies follow the standard protocol. So among these 4 studies, 2 studies was prospective and 2 was retrospective group. So overall incidence of VT in this meta-analysis was 0.5%. They have used these standard regimens, 3 types of standard regimens: unfractionated heparin 5,000 international 2 to 3 times daily, and second standard regimen is enoxaparin 30 mg twice BD daily. Third regimen is enoxaparin 40 BD daily. So they in this study, there are 4 which use the weight adjusted regimen. One was Seffard et al. In 2003. They used some type of mathematical equations to derive the exact dose of unfractionated heparin by this calculation. Second study by Miller et al. Published in 2004. They on the basis of BMI, they divided into 2 groups. BMI having less than 50 BMI, the patient received unfractionated heparin of 5,000. And for the BMI of more than 50, they received 7,500 unfractionated heparin 3 times daily. In the third group, Frieza et al. Published in 2006. In the first group, they have given diabetic pump therapy plus enoxaparin. Enoxaparin is calculated like 1.5 milligram per kg twice daily, or unfractionated heparin 7,000 units twice daily in low risk patients. Second group received IPC DVT pump plus enoxaparin. There's a little bit higher from here, 1.5 to 2 milligram per kg twice daily, or warfarin. So the dose 1.5 milligram per kg, which seems is a very large dose. Exactly, I'm not found, maybe due to the printing error. So, and the last study is the Bork, Green, and Opanek et al. In 2008, published in 2008. They given the low molecular heparin 40 milligram twice daily if the BMI is less than 50, and low molecular 50 milligram twice daily if the BMI is more than 50. So on this basis of this study, the author concluded major bleeding increases using weight adjusted doses. So and there is no advantage in terms of VT reduction. So according to author, the standard dosing regimen is holds good for all the bariatric patients. So the conclusion was standard prophylactic dosing, which is really not optimal, but is not optimal is reasonable and deserves a continued investigation. Currently available data are not in support of adjusted dose strategy. Now coming to post-operative prophylaxis. Question is it essential in the bariatric surgery patients? So the VT event in a majority has been seen after discharge. when we see the less than 30, when we calculate the BT incidence for 1 month, and according to the BOLD database, in which 74,000 patients in this study, the data was collected from BOLD database, 74,000 patient was studied, and the literature was published just short. In this study, the overall incidence of BT was found to be 0.42%. And the interesting fact was that 73% occurring after discharge. When we discharge the patient, the 73% of patients really develop the BAT. There are another data support to this statement. According to NSQ, National Surgery Quality Improvement Program database of American College of Surgery, uh, they also have calculated 30-day BAT incidence. They published in the Journal of Surgery in 2013, and they calculated that post-discharge BAT was 0.29% post-discharge, and 80% event really occurring after discharge. So the BAT incidence 80% occurring after discharge, but within the 30 days, and rest 20% either just after the surgery, before discharge, or maybe after 30 days. So 10% patients who develop symptomatic pulmonary really die within 60 minutes, and 90% patients who survive. In that group of patients, 3-month mortality among survivor of acute event is 70.5%. It means 1 out of 6 patients having risk of developing the pulmonary embolism, risk of dying. So this group of patients, we really need extended post-operative VT prophylaxis. Maybe extended means maybe for 1 month, for 4 week therapy. Now coming to the next question, which group of patients really get extended prophylaxis? So according to this study, who should get the extended prophylaxis thromboapparatus surgery? It is published by the Amian Ali et al. In Annal of Surgery in 2017, and data more than 91,000 patients was taken from the ACS NSQIP database, and it was conducted between 2007 and 2012. And all the patients underwent elective primary and divisional bariatric surgery. And this model was, they basically devised a